Immer, if you're a React fan, is a state manager that's getting a lot of attention now that the new hotness has become React hooks. React hooks are great, but sometimes you need a bit of a state manager to go on top of it. A while back, I made a demo app called View Drops. It's a simple 10x10 cell game where you've got to get all the cells on the board to match whatever your target color is in 25 turns. And well, since I call it View Drops, it was written in Vue. And I thought, I can port this over to React and try out Use Immer and see what that's like. And that's what I've done here. First off, this is a Create React app with the TypeScript option on, which is good since the original View Drops code was in TypeScript. So once I had the application created, I copied over that engine code. Now that code is in pure OO, which is fine in the Vue Vuex world, but not so native in the React world. Not for any practical reason, but because Team React seems to have gone full FP. Never go full FP. Anyway, first things first, I had to change the game engine to be functional in its approach, and that's over in game.ts. So let's zoom down to the bottom of that thing, because that's really where the action is. There are three functions that really drive this thing. The first is create grid, and that builds a grid of cells based on the layout. There are layouts up at the top. There's just two of them, and they're two-dimensional arrays that have ones where there's supposed to be a cell and zeros where there's not supposed to be a cell. So we call create grid whenever we start up, or when we win, or we lose. If you win, you see the next layout. If you lose, then you got to retry the current layout until you get that one right. Then there is place color, and that's a function that, given a grid and a target color, will return a new grid that has the colors updated and owned where appropriate. That's actually how the user plays the game. I love these little 2D games. They're so easy to code and so much fun to play. For a little while, at least. All right, then there's calculate game state, and that's a function that, given a grid, a target color, a number of turns, and it'll give you back whether you have won, lost, or are still playing. In the OO code, that was all baked into place color. I don't know. I guess this is cleaner. To be honest, I'm not really a purist in either direction. I tend to use a mix of OO or FP, mostly based on what's appropriate for the task or what's there already. All right, now that we know the main entry points of the game engine, let's go over to app.tsx and see where they're used. So, most importantly, up at the top, we bring in Use Immer. So that's how we're going to use Immer in this app because we don't have Redux. And then we bring in the game engine code, as well as some of our rendering components. And finally, we get into the app. So calling Use Immer is like calling useState. You give it the initial state, and you get back a tuple, where the first is the immutable data, and the second one is a function that updates that data. So for the initial state, we call create grid to get a list of cells based on the first layout. Actually, wait. Create grid always creates a randomized set of cells. Is that pure FP? I don't know. Whatever. Next, we have the three on handlers. On place color, which is triggered when the user places a color button, and then on next level and on retry level, and those are called from the win or lose screen. So let's zip back to on place color. So with Use Immer, you call the state updater with a function that's really a closure, and in that function then takes a draft. And it updates that draft based on whatever the arguments were to the calling function. So in this case, it was the color that the user pressed, and we call place color with that color and the original grid, and then get back a new grid to put into the draft. And then we also call calculate game state and put that into the draft as well. Use Immer then takes that draft and creates a new immutable state for the app. Why immutable? I don't know. It's better. Personally, I've never had issues with state getting changed in random spots, but that's just me. So let's have a look next at on retry level and on next level. Those are really the same function, but on next bumps the layout number. I could probably dry this out, but it's really not a ton of code. And then finally, we have our rendering code that creates the three-column layout. In the first column, we have the game objective that tells you what your target color is and how many turns you have to get there. In the middle column, we either have the game grid or we have the win or lose screen. And in the last column, we have the buttons that you're going to actually use to play the game. So let's follow those buttons into game controls. So game controls has some emotion-based CSS at the top. And then we have the component that's just a function, and you can see the props here. And in this case, that's a callback function to onPlaceColor. And then we call that in response to a click on any of our button components. And we can drill into those too. There's some fairly complex styling at the top, but really that's just setting up the colors for emotion. And finally, at the very end, we have the component rendering code, which is really just an honest HTML button with an icon in it. And the other components mirror this pattern. I gotta say, I was madly in love with React about 3 years ago, and then came Redux and composition and functions calling functions, and that really started to make React a chore. But this was really fun. The connect stuff is all gone. I didn't want to and didn't have to go crazy with composition. There's no composition in it at all, actually. And it follows my 3 a.m. rule, which is pretty simple. If I get paged at 3 a.m. about the code, I need to be able to understand it. And this is pretty straightforward stuff. Anyway, hope you guys like the walkthrough and the code. The code is up on GitHub, and it's linked to in the description. As always, I'm a big fan of you if you become a fan of me by hitting the subscribe button. And if you don't want to go that far, if you just want to hit the like button, that's totally cool with me as well. So I'm not sure what the next project is, but whatever it is, I should release it probably in about a week or two, so stay tuned.